This pandemic sucks. If you're anything like me, you've been looking for an escape from this dreaded reality, only to have your hand be constantly batted away. In times like these, I think it would be best if we all visited the world's largest source of love, imagination, and happiness, Disney World. Um, like Happy from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs says, you're never too old to be young. Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Boker. Today I'll be discussing taking a trip to Disney World. I am qualified to speak on this subject because I have been to Disney World when I was younger. Secondly, I have always been in love with Disney's films. And thirdly, I had to do quite a bit of research on this topic. So, the three main points I'll discuss today are the history of the Disney Company and Walt Disney himself, along with the advantages of parents taking their children to Disney World, and thirdly, the disadvantages of parents taking their children to Disney World. So, let's proceed to the first point, the history of the Disney Company and Walt Disney himself. So the man who started it all is Walter Elias Disney. He was born in 1901 to a Midwestern family in Chicago. His childhood was a bit unstable just because his dad would switch jobs frequently, so they would move quite a bit. But he did spend a good amount of his childhood in Kansas City, Missouri, which is where he started getting interested in animation. So later on, he registers at the Kansas City Art Institute to pursue animation, and a few years later, him and his brother Roy Disney, they moved to Los Angeles, and in 1928, they released Disney's first short film, Steamboat Willie, in 1928. So, a quote about that would be Paul Jerome Corse, a professor at Stetson University. He states in an article for the Journal of Popular Culture, no character comes close to expressing Walt Disney's own personality than Mickey Mouse. The famous mouse has been Disney's alter ego from his creation as Mortimer Mouse in the 1920s to his stylized role as a corporate symbol in the last few decades. Another fun fact about Mickey Mouse is he was actually created in Walt Disney's image. So Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs becomes the first full animated film that is released by Disney in 1937, so then they start following up with more full animated films. And then Walt Disney decides to open a theme park in 1955, which is Disneyland in Anaheim, California. He actually loved, obviously, the success that came from Disneyland, but he wants to find a way to include the east side of the U.S., so then he starts looking into building the Disney World Resort, and he chooses a spot in Orlando, Florida, which Disney World Resort actually opened in 1971, being the second Disney park to exist. However, Walt Disney died in 1966 due to lung cancer, so he never actually got to see the park open. So other countries started getting Disney parks as well with the success of it, which would be Japan, Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Paris. So now that we have discussed some of the background on Disney's history, let's talk about the advantages of parents bringing their children to Disney World. A huge advantage is the fact that Disney World Resort is the biggest of Disney's theme parks, and it has 4 small parks wrapped up in it, which are Magic Kingdom, Animal Kingdom, Epcot, and Disney's Hollywood Studios. Disney is also providing more representation with an increase of diverse characters. So examples of this would be, Mulan and Tiana and Moana. So according to a 2012 article from Bridget Wayland, published in Interdisciplinary Humanities, The Princess and the Frog became the first Disney princess film to feature a heroine who aspired for something more than romance throughout the film's narrative, which is true. I mean, she still does end up with a prince. But her main goal at first was to open her own restaurant. So also Disney is adding way more representation with, Star Wars, Fox, and Marvel now being included in that company. But Disney can also add, cater to multiple communities. So parents are able to bond with their children over characters that they grew up with. So it just brings them closer together. Also, there are things for adults to do at Disney. A huge thing would be drinking around the world at Epcot, which is a way for parents to learn about different drinks, but also unwind, you know. And then after discussing the positives of Disney World, let's shed some light on the negatives of parents bringing their children to Disney. So Disney has incredibly increased over time. So an example of this would be from Brad Tuttle, author of Secrets of the Kingdom, which is an article published in 2017. He states that a single day's adult admission at the Magic Kingdom now runs as much as $124, compared with $105 in 2015 and $79 in 2010. And even though, this is me speaking now, even though Disney has blossomed and money has changed over time, Disneyland, when it first opened, was only $1.50 for a ticket. But another way Disney is trying to cater to different families, they now offer a vacation planning bundle, which is customizable for each of the families, and it offers different lodging options, you know, tickets and meal plans. But even though it's trying to come across as affordable, Disney Vacation Bundle is still way too pricey for most modern families. So there are many different internet sources families can go around to figure out how to budget their time at Disney. And even though Disney itself is evolving with character representation, the company is still almost century old, so it still has a little bit of racism and ignorance still in it. An example of that would be with the 1946 film Song of the South. So according to Jason Spurv, the author of a 2010 Cinema Journal article, there's no doubt that song perpetuates stereotypes that strengthen culturally destructive notions of institutional racism and white privilege. Another thing about that would be with the song Zippity Doo Dah, which came from Song of the South. It's about a happy slave. And then the other thing is Disney has also recently changed one of its oldest rides. So that was Splash Mountain, which was from Song of the South, and it's now a Princess and the Frog log ride. Disney's influence on the young minds of its viewers can also result in negative results. In reference to Susan Brockis, a communication professor at Purdue University, she states in a 2004 article that was published in Popular Communications Academic Journal, despite producing films that overtly promote values relating to goodness, kindness, and innocence, the company's G-rated offerings are invariably blasted for their formulaic plots, promotion of consumerism and homogeneity, sanitization of history, and corruption of culture. They also are scrutinized for subliminal messages and suggestions of sexism and racism that may influence the minds of even the youngest viewers. Another way this view is according to Julia Golden and Jennifer Jacoby. They are both authors of a 2018 academic journal, and they say, girls' desire to emulate Disney princesses is troubling, considering the princesses' stereotyped images. Although no studies directly prove that playing princess weakens girls' self-esteem or future aspirations, evidence does suggest that exposure to gender stereotypes, like those present in Disney princess media, does have a negative effect on girls' and young women's mental health. So an example of that would be young girls who obviously look up to the princesses. If they meet them at Disney World, it could start to make them compare themselves even more to the Disney expectations set by Disney princesses in today's media. So, to wrap things up, in conclusion, I have discussed the topic of taking a trip to Disney World. There were 3 main points I focused on in the body of my speech, which were a historical background of Walt Disney and his creation of the Disney Corporation, along with the advantages of parents taking their children to Disney World and the disadvantages of parents taking their children to Disney World. There are a myriad of Disney parks worldwide, and it is sprawling. It is a sprawling industry with almost 100 years history. Whether or not you decide to visit the parks, there's no doubt that Disney has had a massive influence on society, particularly young girls, myself included. In spite of the controversy today, I choose to look at the positives, and I can't wait for my next trip to Disney.